Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland, and here I am on Kennington Road in London, and behind me you can see the house where Charlie Chaplin lived for some time as a young man. You can see that this house with the red door, there's the plaque. So Charlie Chaplin was born in London in 1889. The house he was born at no longer stands. It's thought to have been on Walworth Road. There's a plaque on the building which now occupies the site, but there is some dispute as to whether he was born in that exact spot or not. However, this house is original. He definitely lived in this house. These are the bricks that contained him. He must have touched those outer walls occasionally, so I could connect with him by touching the ones just near the door. I haven't done it. Anyway, so Charlie Chaplin, he was born in a family of actors, and they were intermittently in work. His parents had a dysfunctional marriage. It soon broke down. He had a brother and a sister. There was some dispute over the paternity of one of his siblings, and his father walked out on the family, didn't send maintenance. They didn't get it. I mean, I'm not sure they just didn't go to the courts, they didn't have the money to go to the courts or whatever. His mother was afflicted with mental illness and she was soon institutionalized. So the boys were soon put into the workhouse, and that existed in some form into the 1920s. And so his sister was sent to some other institution, and the two boys were together. At least they had each other, and they got to see their mother for about an hour once a week, and they found it incredibly distressing, as you can imagine. They felt they were held there in dishonoring circumstances and so forth, eating hard fare, wearing clothes which they felt stigmatized them. Anyway, they got out of there in their early teens. He tried to get work as an actor, and sometimes he was an abject tramp on the streets. He was a mendicant. He managed to get himself jobs acting, singing and dancing from time to time. So when he made his name playing a homeless person in the 1920s, he knew whereof he acted, because he had actually been homeless. He'd actually been a panhandler on the streets, and of course he rose to be a multi-millionaire, perhaps the most famous actor in the world at the apogee of his fame. So anyway, he lived here, and another South London address. Walworth Road, where he was born, is about 2 miles due east. We're south of the River Thames. So Chaplin moved to the United States in 1912. He moved to California, and Hollywood was just becoming the mecca for all budding actors. And it was the era of silent film, of course. So he had an incredibly expressive face, and talkies didn't come along till a bit later. The Jazz Singer in 1927. Now, what else? So he was a man of left-wing opinions. He was an anti-militarist, and not sure he was an actual pacifist. But he did not come back and volunteer for the First World War, something which was held against him by his compatriots. He married a number of times. He had about a dozen children. So he was a very fecund man, a philanderer. And some of his brood went into acting as well, and as did his daughter, for example. And that film called Chaplin came out in 1991, in which Robert Downey Jr. appeared in the title role. Charlie Chaplin's daughter played Charlie Chaplin's mother, as in this woman portrayed her own grandmother. Anyway, Chaplin was a man of the left. He was appalled by the rise of Adolf Hitler. And the similarities between them were striking. They were both born within 3 days of each other in 1889 in the capital of a great empire, into lower middle class family. He had a couple of surviving siblings. There was some paternity dispute, in Hitler's case not about him but about his father, and they fell on straitened circumstances. By the time they reached their teens, both the parents were out of the picture. In Hitler's case, both dead. Chaplin's case, one just walked out on him, and the other one committed to a mental asylum. And they both moved abroad in their early 20s. Chaplin's case to the United States, in Hitler's case to Germany. And they were about the same height, they had the same colouring, and on and on. So Chaplin was haunted by the numerous coincidences that made him and Hitler brothers under the skin, although obviously in attitude they couldn't have been more different. Chaplin was noted for his gaiety, sunny disposition, his creativity, although both of them had discovered almost by accident that they had the most exceptional gift for public speaking. Hitler's for vociferation and spewing odium, whereas Chaplin's for getting gales of laughter from any audience, for comic business as well as his spiel. So he appeared in a number of films in the 1930s. And then there was The Great Dictator, which Chaplin made in 1940. So the Second World War was already on, in which he played a figure who was unmistakably a stand-in for Adolf Hitler. And with this curious totalitarian party with two X's at symbol, as in double cross. Double cross means you're going to betray someone. And his name was something like Adenoid Hoodler. So everybody realizes that impliedly he is ridiculing Hitler. And there was someone who sounds a bit like Mussolini and things like that. So he's a nobody, he's mistaken for someone who bears an incredible likeness to him, this character played by Chaplin, and then he is turned into this dictator. And then at the end, he gives a speech straight to camera, and this is meant to be an example of extemporaneity. And he holds forth, and it's the most resplendent and exquisite speech, laying out a brighter vision for mankind of brotherly love and eternal peace and things like that. How that there can be social justice. And so some people have called it the greatest speech of all time. It's well worth seeing. And anyway, the Third Reich was incensed by this film for mercilessly skewering Der Führer. And it was shown in France just after the Second World War. Now you might think this was a very sensitive topic, because hundreds of thousands of French people have been killed in the war, in fighting, taken to concentration camps, extermination camps, and murdered, often for being Jewish, sometimes for being resistors. Many have been enslaved in Germany, been killed in Allied bombing raids, and on and on. A few of them have been Vichivists, but no, apparently a lot of them could see a sense of humour about it. It was at least lampooning their mortal foe. So that was Chaplin. So he was in the United States after the Second World War, in the era of McCarthyism rolled around. And in his 40 years in the United States, he had never deigned to apply for American citizenship. I'm unsure why. And then this woman called Joan Barry, who was heavily gravid, came forward and said that she was carrying his child. Now, Chaplin denied this. He said, yes, he had had a physical relationship with her, but he hadn't had congress with her for over 2 years by the time she was pregnant. So that the baby was born. Miss Barry launched a paternity suit against him, and despite blood tests proving he couldn't possibly be the fatherless infant, nonetheless, in California, the blood tests weren't recognized in those days. This is before DNA was even discovered. So he was ordered to pay maintenance for this child till she turned 21. Anyway, he was hounded by McCarthy. People all said he ought to be deported for his films being communist propaganda. Now, he was certainly a leftist. I don't think he was ever a communist. But anyway, he left voluntarily. Then his visa was revoked, making it impossible for him to return. Seemed to be the most dangerous man in America. He retired mostly to Switzerland, partly for tax advantages. Not very left-wing. If you're really a socialist, wouldn't you be happy to pay tax through the nose? But he was invited back to Hollywood in the early 70s for a Lifetime Achievement Award. And so the most dangerous man in America became a national treasure in America, international treasure indeed. And indeed, he was obviously deeply touched by this incredible vote of thanks that the Hollywood establishment had offered him, and he was almost for once at a loss for words, saying, "You beautiful, sweet people." So he died in Switzerland just a couple of years later. So that is the immortal Charlie Chaplin, who grew up here on Kennington Road in London, perhaps a mile from the River Thames. So if you'd like to know more, we can obviously book online lessons with me. So please follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, and Facebook. I'll be your tour guide in London town. Absolve me. And I really need donations to keep this channel going. So you can donate to me on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Callahan spelled C-A-L-L-A-G-H-A-N, all small letters. And another thing is, no donation is too small, except 0, that is. All right, toodaloo.